What's up everyone? Chào các bạn và chào mừng các bạn đến với podcast Slow and Clear của What's Up English. Today I have a stuffed nose. I've been sneezing a bit, so you might be able to hear that in my voice. Well, you probably definitely can. But anyway, last week I put out a video about jobs and how to talk about your job. So this week, you guys are going to learn a lot more new words about how to talk about your job, right? Because in this podcast, I'm going to tell you guys about 3 jobs that I had before I came to Vietnam. 3 jobs that I had in Canada. And each of these jobs has an interesting story with it. Because in one job, I got fired. In another job, I got scammed. And in the third job, I had a pretty embarrassing moment. And that's the one I will talk about last. And remember, guys, in part 1 of this series about jobs, if you haven't watched it yet, you can check my last video where I give some useful vocabulary words and phrases for how to talk about your job. But now, let's start the podcast. So, my first job. I'll tell you guys about the first job that I ever did, and it was at a supermarket, like a grocery store. And a grocery store is where, is a store that sells food and some other things, but mostly food and so, like stuff for your kitchen, stuff for your bathroom, stuff like that. And I got this job when I think it was grade 11 or grade 10. I can't remember exactly, but I was 16 years old. So 16 years old, I think I was in grade 11. And I got this job because my friend's parents owned this supermarket. And I just asked her, hey, can I work there? I need some money. Like, when you're very young, you have no money, and even having some money is pretty awesome. And then she said, yeah, you can work at our supermarket. And it was close to my house too. So I thought, awesome. So I went there. I had an interview with her dad. It's not like a very high position, so there weren't too many expectations. Okay, you seem like a good guy. We will hire you. And I was hired. My job at this supermarket was to be what's called a service clerk. And that is the official title, a service clerk. But what my job was basically going around the supermarket, getting the shopping carts that people used. So I would go into the parking lot and get them from the place where after they finish using the shopping cart, they put it there. So I would take those shopping carts and bring them back into the store. So when more customers came, they could reuse them and the cycle continues. I would also take baskets and, put them in the right place. I would help people if they have any questions, clean things up. It was pretty, a starter level job at a supermarket. Another way to call this job was cart boy. Some people called it cart boy, which is funny because my name is Carter. And apparently my name has a really old meaning, which is someone who pushed carts or who was in charge of carts, like before we had cars and stuff. Apparently, if you Google what does Carter mean, that's what it says. Not sure if it's true, but if it is, that's pretty funny. Anyway, that was my job, and I was young. I was in high school, So I would basically go straight from high school, finishes at around 3:30, and then take a bus to go to this supermarket, change into my uniform, and then work until I think around 10 or 11 p.m. So yeah, that was my first job. And this job, I got fired. Not because I did anything like bad or anything stupid, but I got fired because in the beginning, I worked in a department as the service clerk. And I told them I can't work on Monday because Monday I switch from living at my mom's house to my dad's house and dad's house to mom's house because my parents were split up. And so on Monday I would do that. So I can't work Monday night. They said, okay. And then I worked like that for a few months. So then they moved me to work in the garden center. And this was a department outside in the parking lot where they sold plants and trees and stuff like that during the summer. So when they moved me there, I assumed they would still remember that I could not work on Monday. And then I was scheduled to work on Monday. And I told them I can't do that. And then the lady who was in charge of the shifts, she, I guess, got really mad. And then when I went to check my schedule for the next week, I just had no hours. So it's like they didn't officially fire me. They didn't, tell me that I'm fired. They just stopped giving me hours. So it's like, okay, I'm pretty much fired if I don't have any hours anymore. So yeah, and then that was it for that job. I worked there for about a year. And to me, that's ridiculous because I worked there for a while with no problems. And then something happens and then no more hours. I'm fired. But, that's how it is with jobs at that age, at that level. Jobs, they come, they go. And it was my first job, so I had experience with working and being responsible for things. So that was my first job. I was a cart boy at a supermarket, and eventually I got fired. Now, here's my second job. And in this job, I got scammed. Not by the person who employed me, not by the employer, but by a customer. So at this job, it was another grocery store, but it was only for imported fruits and vegetables. And it was more expensive than the regular grocery stores. So this was also from a friend of mine from high school whose dad owned a grocery store. I don't know why, but I had a few friends who owned grocery stores and they gave me jobs. So I had this job, I think, when I was around 18, so my senior year at high school. And at this job, I was a cashier. And a cashier is the person who, when you go to buy something, you give them the money and they scan your items, right? And that's how I got scammed. Oh, and another interesting thing about this job was this grocery store was in an area that had a lot of people from Myanmar and from Thailand. So that was kind of the first time that I started interacting with people from Southeast Asia, because some of the workers there, the guys who worked in the produce section, and the produce means like vegetables and fruits. So the guys who worked in the back, like cutting them up and peeling them, preparing them, most of them were from Thailand and Myanmar, and they had only come to Canada a few years ago. So actually their English wasn't very good, and they had names that I couldn't pronounce at the time. But that was my first time kind of interacting with Southeast Asian people. And I remember those guys were always smiling and always really kind of friendly and happy. And they just had a good energy to them. Anyway, I had been working at that grocery store for a while, probably at least 6 months. And this guy came up, a customer. And he looked, when I think back on it, he looked super suspicious. Like, he had tattoos on each of his fingers. He was bald. He was maybe 40 or 50. And he had round glasses. He almost looked like a magician. And he was wearing this round top hat. Not really a top hat, but a round hat, like a black hat with a round top. He looked literally like a magician on the street. And I thought, okay, this guy seems interesting with all his tattoos on his fingers, on his hands. So he came up, very friendly, and he bought something kind of cheap. I think it was just worth a few dollars. And he handed me a $50 bill. And then after he gave me the $50 bill and I put it into the computer, because when you're a cashier, people give you money, you input the amount of money they gave you, and then the computer tells you how much to give them back. And so after I put that amount into the computer, he goes, oh, sorry, no, can you take this instead? And he gave me, I think it was $100 bill. And he said, oh, it's easier for my deposits with the bank and, you know, having fewer notes and stuff like that. And when I think about it now, it didn't really make sense. But at the time, I was still confused. And I was like, what? And then he said, yeah, just, you know, take this and then this. And he did some switching with the bills. And it kind of made sense a little bit. But I was suspicious because I just felt that something was not right. And then my coworker, who was next to me, she was also a cashier. She looked at it and she said, oh, like, what's going on? Because she's, you know, she was kind of older and she was very, not very patient. And she goes, okay, well, he gave you this. And so you just give him this and then that's it. It's finished. And I thought, yeah, but I don't know. And then, so she was agreeing with him. And he's like, yeah, that's all. And then I thought, okay, whatever. And so I just did it. And basically what happened was I gave him some bills back and then everything seemed okay. I still had a weird feeling. My coworker was like, yep, it's all good. That makes sense. And I thought, I don't know. But anyway, so that finished. He left. And then the next day I get a call from the owner telling me to go up into the office. And the owner is my friend's dad. And so he's pretty friendly. So I went up there and he said, Carter, why was there $50 missing from your cash when the manager counted the money last night? And right away, I knew what it was. I said, this guy came up, and actually what we call these scammers is they're called quick change artists. And a quick change artist is basically a scammer who does scams for small amounts of money, like usually under $100 or under $50. And they just find a way to make you think that you're doing a fair transaction, but in reality, you're giving them money. Again, in hindsight, it feels almost embarrassing to fall for something like that. But yeah, I knew something wasn't right. So anyway, I told them what happened. They looked at the camera and they said, oh, this guy, he came last year and he did the same thing to somebody else. And so this guy, he most likely goes to different supermarkets, different places with cashiers, and he does his quick change trick. And he makes money like that. I had to pay back half of it. They said they would cover the rest. But I was annoyed with my coworker too. And I told her what happened. I said, like, I knew something was not right. And she said, oh, like, sorry, you know, it seemed all good. And said, yeah, well, if you feel like something is not right, your gut is telling you something is not right, then just follow that and make completely sure that you're not making a mistake, because what I should have done was I should have called my manager down, recount everything, and make sure that the money is proper, the money is correct. But for sure, if I had done that, I'm sure the guy would have a way to, oh no, okay, here, just do this and this, and just cancel it and probably leave, because my manager, once she found out what he was doing, would probably call the police. And this guy is not the type to just stay there. He would probably just leave. So anyway, that was my second job where I got scammed. My third job, and this is the job with a very embarrassing moment that happened with one of the owners of the restaurant. And funny enough, she was Vietnamese. Her name was Van. At the time, I just called her Van because they said, oh, my name is Van. I said, okay, Van. And so this was a Vietnamese Thai fusion restaurant. So a fusion restaurant is a restaurant with two different types of food kind of fused together, which means combined or mixed with each other. I got this job at this restaurant during the summer of my first year when I was studying in college. My friend recommended it to me. Well, he didn't really recommend it. He just said, I have a job at this place. They're looking for someone. You could work there during the summer. The pay is okay. I said, okay, let's do it. This was a Vietnamese Thai fusion restaurant. The owners were both Vietnamese. I think they were from the South. And let me just describe this place for you guys, okay? The owners were Vietnamese. The husband was a big Vietnamese guy, like jacked, big muscles, tattoos, ponytail, like long hair. He looked like he might have been a gangster when he was in Vietnam. But I didn't really talk to him much because he wasn't often there. And the combination of workers at this place was really strange. The cooks were from the Philippines. The owners were Vietnamese. The food was Thai and Vietnamese fusion. And then the servers were some Vietnamese, some white. And yeah, so there was like a mix of everything at this restaurant. All right, so this was the hardest job I have ever done. And my role at this restaurant was to basically do everything. I had to wash the dishes. I had to serve the dishes. Like usually the dishwasher doesn't have to serve the dishes. But I guess the owners were kind of cheap and they didn't want to hire more people. So I had to wash dishes, serve dishes, make desserts. What else was there? Oh, it was basically everything. There were just so many things that the entire time I was working there, it was just like really busy. And the shifts were about 12 hours. So it would start from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. with like 1 hour break in the middle. And I remember there was this one guy who had the same job as me, a Vietnamese guy. He was a bit older and his name was Đức. And he was very friendly, very nice. And somehow he could do all the work without even like sweating. And me and my other friend, Steve, would do the same job, but we would be like, oh my God, with this. And we would be like sweating and almost overwhelmed by the work. But this Vietnamese kid who did the same job, well, I shouldn't call him a kid. He was a bit older, but he could do the job and he wouldn't even break a sweat. He would just be like totally fine. And I was like, I don't know how you do this, but anyway. Yeah, this job was horrible. It was a lot of work. It was tiring. And the embarrassing moment happened when the owner's wife asked me to bring her a dish of chicken wings. And I said, okay, I'll bring the chicken wings for you. And the way they put the chicken wings on the plate was to make it fancy, they like stack them up. So these are chicken wings. They're not like blocks. They're like uneven shapes. And so they're not very good at stacking unless you have a big pile. But there was only, I think, 6 on this small dish, and they were stacked up high. And I had to bring it to her like that. And so I was bringing her the dish, and the one on the very top fell off the dish, and it landed on the floor. And me, being like young and not knowing what to do, and like, oh no, I pick up the wing, and I said to her, I asked her, oh, do you still want it? And she looked at me with this face of like shock, like, and then she said, what type of question is that? No, I don't want it. And then I said, okay. And then I just gave her the rest of the wings. I apologized, for dropping one. But yeah, it was really embarrassing. It was one of those moments where right after it happened, I was like, why did I ask her if she wanted the wing? It's one of those things that I thought about at night after that for a bit, before I go to bed, and have that memory in my head of asking the owner if she wants a chicken wing that just fell on the floor. But anyway, and the reason why dropping this chicken wing was embarrassing was because the owner's wife was really beautiful. Like, she was so good looking. And I felt like nervous when I had to serve her because I was like, I don't want to mess anything up. And I'm like a young kid. So yeah, that's why I felt embarrassed for doing that. Some others might think it's not a big deal. And the question was just so like, who would eat a chicken wing that just fell on the ground? So anyway, it was, good times. And so those are basically 3 jobs that I had before I came to Vietnam. There were some more, but I'm not going to talk about all of them. These 3 had little interesting stories with them, so I thought I would tell you guys those. But to sum it up, I got fired from my first job at the supermarket. I got scammed at my second job at a grocery store. And then I had a very embarrassing moment at my third job. So guys, I think that's going to sum up the podcast for today. I hope there were a lot of words that you learned from this podcast. And next week will be a video for Speak With Me to practice using the words that we learned in this podcast and in the last video. And also, I'm thinking again about shifting the direction of this channel to make it 1, purely in English, and 2, purely input. So I'm going to be making a slow conversation video with my friend, a foreign friend. So it will be like this podcast, but in a conversation. And I won't be doing more videos in purely Vietnamese because many people have been commenting that they like listening to me speak English slowly, and it helps them practice their listening skills at the same time while learning whatever I'm teaching. And to me, that does make sense. So that's a little update about what's to come. I think this will be the first time that I've uploaded twice in 2 weeks. So 1 upload each week for 2 weeks. So I'm happy about that. Yay. But yeah, so that will be it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in the next video. See you later.